a safer place we all can live in. There's a risk we're taking, not having any guns. With guns we have a better chance for everyone.
All right, we love our guns because we love freedom. What a beautiful idea, Mel.
Oh, yeah.
So this is Nephi Kaliki, and this is the Double Tap Show. We're here every Saturday from 2 to 3 p.m. Joining me live in the studio is the call and ambulance guy, Mel.
Hey, and a hearty yo to you, Nephi. Let's go.
Did you say a hearty yo?
Yo. Hey,
Ho, ho,
no, I'm
ho.
from South Philly. Yo.
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 All right, well, as usual, Mel.
Yes.
It just seems we get caught. Sometimes you just wind up being who you are, and you can't be anything different. And what we seem to be really good at on this show is slapping people with radio waves. Bah! Right in the face. Because we've had, when we did the piece on Howard Chef, hooked up his trailer, moved out of town. Right? Haven't heard from CCW Maggie online. She's went zip quiet. And today's not going to be any different. The only difference today, Mel, this is something that that we're going to talk about today, is I have a tremendous amount of experience with this because, as you know, I finished my book and it kind of got held up in printing because we were having it done in China. And so it hasn't released yet, but on the subject of fixed point shooting, which is, my foveal-based sighting system. It's an eye-hand coordinated sighting system designed for self-defense shooting. While I was in near completion of the book, I came across this study by Sage Dynamics and a gentleman by the name of Aaron Cowan. And now this is a person that has a resume. I'll say that. He has a resume. And he's fairly well known in the firearms industry. So this show is not, I'm not just talking about some low-level CCW Maggie person. I'm talking about somebody that is on a larger scale, more known in the industry. But as you know, truth is what's most important to me, and especially as it pertains to my students and people in general who are trying to find answers to what they're going to do about their personal safety. And so this report, I just give you a little background, it's been used, so it's a so-called 4 or 5 year study that Aaron Cowan of Sage Dynamics created, in which he attempts to compare red dot sights with iron sights. And this study, if you will, was then used by law enforcement and government to justify making large purchase orders of red dot sights, holsters, gear, equipment, sometimes trading in guns. I think some of the departments I looked at were spending $50,000, $60,000, $75,000 a pop. And this report, in many instances, has been used to justify that financially. The problem is, this report's not scientific. And I'm going to pick holes in it, and not for the sake of just being a jerk, but because it needs to be done. Because people are relying on this item, and people are pushing towards red dot sights, which on the range, they're great. They make everything better on the range, but that's not what we're talking about. So, Mel, I have somebody that I work with. His name's JB. He is a data scientist. He's a numbers cruncher. He builds modeling and deals with massive volumes of numbers and things. I'm going to bring – he couldn't come on the show because he's in another state, and we had to record it last night. But I want to play this conversation, and we'll take a break in the middle of it and then come back after the break and finish it. But because I think this conversation between a data scientist and myself about this subject is really important. So, Mark, go ahead and play the track. Okay, so you and I, JB, have worked on many intellectual projects over the years.
Yes, we have.
And I have thoroughly appreciated all of the conversations that we've had, because I can always count on a sound mind who doesn't always agree with me.
It wouldn't be any fun if you always agreed with each other.
No, it wouldn't be any fun, but we always find the truth.
Yeah.
And I set out, several years ago, writing my book called Fixed Point, which does tackle the issue of red dot sites and iron sites.
Right.
When I was almost done with the book, I came across this study for Sage Dynamics and Aaron Cowan. And I saw us going in the same direction for a while, until it came to the part where money got involved over purpose. And I came to that same crossroads, and I said, okay, the answer is no sights, eye-hand coordinated shooting. And then I saw his report, and it came to the same crossroads, and it was like, red dots are the answer. And so I dug into it after I had already written my book, and you and I had been through that process. And so I was wanting to add things to the cover, basically like, how did we go two different directions? And I believe the answer was that one path led to financial success and the other path led to altruism, which I'm more concerned about doing what's right for people who are trying to find the right way to defend themselves.
Yeah.
Right. I have other things I could be doing. I feel this is more of a mission than anything, and I want to hurry up and finish it. But my contention so Sage Dynamics and Aaron Cowan, look, I'm not trying to attack him as a person, because I think that he's on the right track, just like I have been in writing my book about this very same subject. But I want to talk about how we went in two different directions. And that when I read through his study, and I've read through it several times, and so have you.
Yep.
I have some serious issues with it. And my issues with it are that it's not, to me, it does not appear to be scientific or to follow accepted research modeling that
I agree. Yeah.
Universities have accepted that you need. Now, here's the problem from my perspective, and my biggest issue is that you take red dot sites and you have iron sites and you compare them to each other. And the average person is going to go, oh, yeah, Pepsi Coke challenge. Like I get it.
Yeah.
But there's a huge problem with that, because it's presented more empirically, like there's data to go behind this. And in any intelligent and accepted research methodology, you have a control group and you have one or more experimental groups.
Okay, correct.
For the average person to understand where I'm coming from with this, so I can kind of break down research models into layman's terms, a person has bad eyes, right? And they can't see like they used to.
Right.
The treatment are lenses. So red dots could be reading glasses and iron sights could be bifocals. So the eye is the disease. The lenses are the treatment for the disease.
Right.
Those two things are comparing two treatments to each other without a control group. Now, the eye is the disease itself, so that's a variable that we're trying to affect. What Aaron was missing is that control group, which was the gun, which is devoid of any effect. That means no sights on the gun, naked eye. That's your control group, because you could put a gun in a vise and it's going to perform perfectly. In fact, it's a great control group because the gun performs very consistently. The human being and the eyes and the sights and all the things that we introduce into that natural spectrum, those are the ones that are just wrought with variables.
Yeah, a lot of them.
All right, Mel. So that's the conversation I was having with JB last night, and we're going to pick it up after the break again. But this is the difficult thing in explaining. So an average person, there was a study. I did something, and here's the result. But you don't really dig into it because who reads anything anymore? Right? But we're digging into it. And JB is a strong, solid credentialed mind in dealing with this, but the research models are there, and if the modeling that was created behind a study that was used by the government to make financial purposes was flawed or fraudulent, I'm sorry, but I'm going to make the argument that fraud was committed, right? To create a bogus study in order to justify it, because Aaron Cowan and Sage Dynamics sell red dot sites to agencies. They financially interested in it. It's wrought with implicit bias. It's got conflicts of interest in it, and it doesn't follow a scientific model. So when we come back, we're going to get into that a little bit more. But I am going to make the argument that I think if that study was fudged or made to be fraudulent, that some heads need to roll here. So as we go into the break here, I want to make sure that we have all our sponsors know that Hadari Law Group is sponsoring our show today, and you can reach them about personal injury stuff. So Hadari Law Group, Agidari Law Group, they're really awesome individuals over there, know them personally as well. So when we get back from the break, we'll pick up right where we left off. This is the Double Tap Show. All right, we are back. Vegas CCW, making the world a safer place, one little bitch at a time. Can you? I can hear you, Mel. How you doing?
No. Okay. One little bitch at a time.
Yes.
I know that. I remember that. Right.
I love that so much.
It's a great. Can we have T-shirts with that?
Yes, we can. But, you asked me during the break, Mel,
Yes.
Because, I'm trying to make a complicated subject a little bit more simple because people stay with me, because following along with this is extremely important, especially if you're getting the red dot bug. And this is a device that on a range conditions, it improves things quite a bit, even for me. But also, I don't think about things in the context of how it applies on the range. I think of how it applies in a fight, right? And there are two different worlds. It's the difference between a Macintosh and a Microsoft computer. That's how different they are between PC and Mac. Fight, training on the range. Mac, PC, right? Same thing. So it's important to try to follow along with what we're saying here, because this study, and I say it in quotes, was used specifically to justify financial decisions on use in duty for law enforcement. Right, so officers could carry them, and departments spend millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars over the years on this technology that in my book, I came to the same point, Mel, in my studies about the sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight reactions, and all these things. And the answer was, well, only the naked eye-hand coordination, and target focus will work in a fight. But Aaron, on the other hand, he was like, nope, red dots is the savior for everyone. And I'm like, no, how did you make that hard right turn when everything I studied led to the left turn? And it's free, right? Like fixed point shooting's free. It's already in your head. It's called eye-hand coordination, foveal focused shooting. And it gets better with adrenaline, right? It's optimal system. And the problem with the red dots is they're still sights, and anything, if you go target focused in a gunfight or in an adrenal based situation, anything between the target and you and your eyes is going to be out the door. So we're going to pick up the conversation again. Mark, go ahead and play that. We'll try to kind of catch up where we were before.
So my issue with this, first and foremost, is that the model wasn't set up correctly. And so how can you trust the data on the other end of it?
I agree.
So when you look through this, and I'll put it in quotes, report, because at this point, I dare to say I'm going to call it advertorial and not any kind of scientific research.
A lot of advertising in the document. Yeah.
So give people a little background. JB, you've been involved in a lot of data crunching and building statistical modeling and dealing with large volumes of data and presenting it in ways that, people can understand, especially you also have a background in engineering. So you understand structures, and you also understand how things need to be presented in a way that stands up to scrutiny.
The biggest problem you run into with reports like this, and to be honest, if people take a look at just the last 3 years, where we've been inundated with information about how we should live our lives, how we should protect our health, information is presented that is confusing. Sometimes it's presented in a way where people are trying to honestly achieve a goal. Sometimes it's presented in a way where it's thorough, an analysis that demonstrates whether you have gone the right direction or not. And then sometimes it's presented in a way where people are trying to achieve a specific goal. You run into a problem when you don't have a solid foundation. You use the example of disease. That's actually a pretty good one. The control group is usually people who are taking a placebo. They believe they're getting the drug. And we know how the body reacts to disease. And we know how the body reacts to a placebo. So we can use it to filter out falsehoods about the item being tested. I couldn't see a way to do that. When you use the idea of a Pepsi versus Coke, I mean, we took students. We didn't take people who I didn't know enough about them. I mean, I knew they were students. I didn't know their ages. I didn't know their qualifications. I didn't know anything about the circumstances, how they were standing, how they were shooting. I didn't know if one of them happened to have, let's say Parkinson's disease. Their hand shook. I knew nothing about that. All I knew is that they were students. I was told that they had passed some qualifications, but I were not told what those qualifications were. And they started shooting. Your idea of
willy-nilly.
Yeah, willy-nilly. And I mean, you're right. They just got told about a bad grade that morning, or somebody had an argument with their boyfriend or girlfriend the night before. I mean, anything could get in the way of consistent performance shooting. The idea of putting the gun in a vise where you could guarantee the behavior of the weapon, that would have been a baseline reference that could then be used. And honestly, the idea could be, let's put it in a vise and have somebody sight the gun in the vise, lock it down, and then fire the weapon. At that point, you've removed a lot of the human from the problem.
The variables,
variables
ruin research.
What's the strength of their arm? How good an eyesight do they really have?
From my perspective as somebody who deals with students like that, if you're going to do let's keep it in the same study with eyes. If you're trying to, you can't take a certain lens for farsighted people and try it on anyone that has vision problems and then try to make that scientific. So you need to find subjects who are as similar to each other as humanly possible.
You got to get rid of the variations.
And so what that would mean is, if this study was done, should have been, first of all, we know that every person becomes farsighted under an adrenal sympathetic nervous system response. That's the constant. We know that. So that means in your research objectives, you should be stating, we want to find a system that works specifically, A, with adrenaline, and B, with farsightedness. So any sight that doesn't cater to farsightedness is not going to work in the context of combat or self-defense.
No.
So
Great
we
for the
know
range,
those should be the Bible verses we start with in the study in the first place. And I didn't see him setting out with any other objective other than to get police departments to spend a bunch of money. That's really what I got. So what it should have been is you have people, males between the ages of 40 and 45, which means their eyes have all aged about the same.
Your target
all
audience.
right-handed, all right eye dominant, all using the same shooting platform.
They should have all come out of the same training system.
And all have the same performance level. Now, if all those things were in place, then your data could be much more reliable. But the shots being off place, it's like when somebody has a laser. People ask me in my classes, can I use one of those projecting lasers to qualify? And I'm like, absolutely. It's not going to help your shooting because you're going to hold it on the bullseye. And then when you pull the trigger and start affecting that weapon, your bad form's going to show up and bang, the shot's going to come over here. So there's your laser. And that's very well what can happen when you have inconsistencies and you don't have true uniformity in the people you're comparing. You have all these variables that could have come from a million other reasons other than the deficiencies in the sites themselves.
Well, and we, like you said, we don't want to beat up on Mr. Cowan. I have no reason to believe he wasn't trying to be completely honest in his efforts. But I'm not so
sure about that, JB.
Let's give him just for the moment, let's give him the benefit of the doubt.
Okay, for the moment.
I can remember from as far back as high school, a class down at a local university for a summer science fair. The most popular class they taught was a class called Lying with Statistics.
Yeah, I know that.
Data is not true. Data is simply data. And how you present that data, that's what creates the truth.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I had one of my bigger concerns from the report. I mean, he went through a whole bunch of background science, finally got to citing a document from I believe it was Northwestern University. He finally gets down to his test, the one he performed. And I was I wasn't a little concerned. I was really concerned that I saw the red dot data consistently falling in virtually identical arcs from shots fired to the number of misses. They always went high, medium, lower, medium, low. Every single situation he set up exactly the same. Then you get to the iron sights. There's stuff all over the map. Now, let's assume that he's absolutely correct, that the red dot's better than the iron sights. You would expect to see stuff all over the map. But his should have been all over the map too.
Yes, because sights do not make good shooters.
Well, no. And honestly, unless he had people that were practiced using his product, you would expect variation. You would expect to see highs and lows that weren't this consistent, perfect line every single time.
Well, JB, let me stop you for a second because I want to reassert that point that you put red dots or any other, advanced sighting systems in the hands of a bad shooter, it does not make them one bit better.
No.
Saying that red dots are improving their performance on the range is absolutely horse poop.
You took me down once. I visited you in Las Vegas. You put a gun with ammunition in my hand. It was the second time I'd fired a pistol in my life. And the only reason it hit the wall in front of me was because we were inside in an enclosed building. I have no practice. I have no talent. I have no skill. I have no training. And as I fired that weapon, I can tell you right now, the gun went all over the place. It went up. It went left. I mean, who knows where the bullet actually hit? I know from personal experience that unless you're practiced in the art, you're not going to get consistent results. But he's selling to people who are theoretically practiced in the art. But it's not who he tested.
No, because I can tell you that in a true study, you would have no sights on the gun, which means no treatment. Iron sights, red dots. That would have been a true study. And then all of the individuals at the same level of experience and same eye quality, same vision, all of these things would play a role in at least a baseline that's reliable. But I have issues with that because it suggests in his study that red dot sights make bad shooters better. And it does not. It's impossible because it's just the physics that come into play the second that gun starts creating massive volumes of energy and how they're applying pressure on the left side, the right side, whether they're going against a lever or whether they're fixed out or whether their left hand and elbow were lazy. All these factors ruin the data either way. But what I think is happening here, because he makes a lot of statements in his report that when you have a sympathetic nervous system response, you become farsighted and target focused. We agree 100%.
He's quoting the usual science. He's correct.
Well, no, that's not the usual science because most people don't understand what Aaron and I are both talking about. The difference is that Aaron went down the road to use that to justify red dots because he sells red dot sites and he wanted departments across the country to place orders. That's the other problem I have with the research is that he's clearly biased. He has a financial interest in red dots being approved by departments. Now, on the other side of it, with fixed point shooting in my book, it's free. Fixed point, which is, now I'm not saying red dots don't have an improvement. I mean, I have a set of red dots on one of my range guns. I use the red dots at 21 feet because I'm getting old. My eyes are not 20/20 like they used to be. I'm farsighted, which means that I naturally shoot like I would in a fight. So anything that's not based on that. Now, no matter what you put in front of
terms of your eyesight, you do.
Yeah.
It's worth reminding people there's a difference between your hand shaking because of the adrenaline rushing through your system. I mean, there's a lot of things that go wrong, and becoming farsighted is just one of them.
Yes, there's probably 15 or 16 of them that we cover in the book. But the most significant ones that we should be relying on are the things that we know are never going to change, and that is you become farsighted because your pupils dilate, right? So you lose you lose near field focus. The other thing is that when you have an adrenal response, you go target focus. So that says that if the state you're going to be in a fight is target focused, that eliminates iron sights and red dot sights.
Eliminates anything that's sitting on the gun.
Anything in between you and the target is out of there.
All right. So, Mel, obviously we're getting into some science here.
Yeah, very detailed.
Right. It's very detailed, but it's extremely important because people are basing their life decisions on how to carry a gun. And they're like, oh, I need to get the latest and the greatest red dots because what do people do? They follow law enforcement. So, listen, I want to remind you guys also, if you guys know my boy Steve Sanchez, he's on the other stations during the week. We are going to be doing something with Ventura Munitions on the 11th of May. We're going to be doing raffles. I think we're giving out a shotgun, some knives, and some other stuff. Ventura Munitions is one of the folks in town that's, one of our buddies that we get along with very well. So Steve is going to be out there. I'm going to be out there. We're going to be giving out some free CCWs. So it's May 11th. It's a Thursday from 3 to 6 p.m. So come down there and see us. We're going to be having a remote broadcast with Steve Sanchez. And we're going to be giving some stuff away. This is their annual customer appreciation thing. So if you're not a customer yet, become one. And you can get all the perks and benefits from that. So this is the Double Tap Show. We'll be right back after the break.
You got to know when to draw down, when to call the law down, know when to move and know when to shoot. You better move for cover. In the middle of a gunfight, there's no time to be a hero till the shooting's done.
All right, we are back. Mel, remember,
Yes.
That commercial reminded me to tell you,
Oh,
don't breastfeed when you're smoking marijuana.
I'll remember that.
Hey, those commercials are so useful, but they're just it's difficult because they're so soft and fluffy, and then you get on there with me, and it's like rah in your face.
Exact opposite.
So, Mel, I was going to tell you after the break, because why this is an important subject is it's not just because I think that that some fudging's gone around here, is that people follow the example of law enforcement.
Yes.
Right? A lot of people in my CCW classes are like, oh, I carry this one because it's a standard with law enforcement. I carry a Glock because cops carry it, and all these other reasons. So they're following these examples. And if the law enforcement industry is following bad information, now they're setting an example for everyone that falls below that. And so all these people are going to be buying these crutches again. When it comes down to it, you have to read my book. You can find out about it at fixpointsystems.com. This is a book I spent quite a bit of time and research on. It's the same basic thing that Aaron Cowan was doing, except that at the end of it, I realized that there was nothing to sell except truth and information, and that is your naked eye and your eye-hand coordination is the only thing that you're going to be using in self-defense or in combat. Now, this doesn't have anything to do with rifles. Those are two different worlds. So I'm only talking about with pistols. So that's why this was an important conversation. So I want you to finish listening to what JB and I were talking about. No. Mark, go ahead, play.
And the problem is that we're so dependent on technology and people saying there was 10 years of research into these red dot sights and the highest technological minds are involved in designing it. Well, I tell you, he talks about 400,000 years of developing and using weapons, 400,000 years of developing this technology called eye-hand coordination. And I'm not picking on you, JB, but even for you, your eye-hand coordination works just as good as Tiger Woods or Michael Jordan's.
You're certainly correct. There are things
you pick up your keys, it takes you one try.
Yeah, I can hit a baseball that's pitched at me, and it's not because I'm staring at my bat.
Yes, so that's a constant. People's eye-hand coordination performs very, very sophisticated calculations with proprioception, and what really kind of clued me in, and I hesitate to use, I'll say neophyte, okay? I'll stay on that word. Because I do think that Aaron is redeemable, because if him and I had a conversation, we would find a lot of agreement in a lot of these things. But when he said in his report, hand-eye coordination, that really was a red flag for me, because that is an amateur in neurological terminology, because there's no such thing as hand-eye coordination. There's eye-hand coordination. And sports has such relevance to shooting and with fixed point shooting because it's natural. And in sports, everybody embraces adrenaline. They get pumped up. The coaches are amping them up in the locker rooms because they perform better under adrenaline, because that's what adrenaline is. It's a Superman mode. But with guns, because you put that doubt in front of your face, because you're going, I want to look at the guy, but I need to look at my training. I need to look at and you're back and forth all the time. It's in the way. And need I remind you that when we were closest to this technology back, in the late 1800s, the gunslingers of the day didn't pull the gun up to their eyes and sight anything. They knew that the guy who could break leather and level it faster than the other guy, they were using eye-hand coordination. You get people pumped up in sports, in combat sports. And what my friend Pete Pinto is, a UFC trainer, Pete says it's not relative to the fight until you're standing in front of somebody else. And what Aaron was mentioning in there about, trying to recreate an adrenal response and use that study, you can't take something that's not going to be the same, like what you do on the range doesn't translate at all into how it's going to be in a fight. So why are you creating these research products on the wrong delivery mechanism? It doesn't work that way.
And he tried to. I'll give him credit. He tried to set something up that made sense without putting people in danger. He tried to set up scenarios where the shooter would enter an area, be approached in a threatening way by other people holding prop knives, being required to stay a certain distance away from the shooter. They could verbally abuse the person. But if I were the shooter, I'm walking into a situation where I know I'm perfectly safe. If there's adrenaline, it's because I'm getting offended by what they've said, and not because I feel like I'm going to die.
Well, JB, I want to hear you go through, from a scientific and academic perspective, how much horse crap is in this report.
A lot more than I wanted to see. Yes, there was data collected, but as far as I can tell, the data is not substantive. There's no way to correlate the data back to a predictable response that could be repeated. And that's the core essence of science. If I do the test properly, if I publish the test properly, the next guy in line can take my paper, go out and repeat the experiment, and get exactly the same result. Honestly, I don't think anybody could repeat this and get the same result. There's just not enough information there to set it up.
No, it bothers me. The whole thing bothers me, which leads me to believe that either for me, there's three things that are missing from his study, and that is 3 little letters at the end of his name.
Yes.
Now that could be innocent enough. I'm just going to give it a shot. And in my book, I made it very clear. Look, I'm not a scientist, even though I understand this material fairly well. I'm not going to present information as if I am, because that would make me a charlatan. But I present it in practical way that people can understand in the application is, where's your guidelines? And it leads me to believe that, okay, he sells these things to agencies, so he has a financial interest in the report supporting his own conclusions, because I went down the same path and got to that point, and I go, the natural eye is going to be better than both. Now, on the range, red dots are great, but we're not talking about the range. We're talking about when you go from one hard drive and operating system in your parasympathetic nervous system to your fight or flight mode in your sympathetic nervous system. You can't compare. It's like Macintosh and Apple. You can't study Apple to explain Mac or study Microsoft. You just can't do that. And so I promise you this, I could take no sights on a gun with fixed point and beat out red dots, iron sights, lasers, whatever you put in front of me. And there's plenty of videos. And remember, we did this for 5 years and 11,000 fights with simunition, full contact. People getting their noses busted, stitches, knocked out, choked out, shot up.
And that's more valuable.
That's why I know this stuff, because we did that stuff he's complaining that he couldn't do.
You were doing things that you had to put people into situations with your gunfights where they felt actually threatened.
They were throwing up afterwards.
All right, Mel. So obviously we could do this all day long. This is a very, very deep subject. Yeah. If you want to know more about what we're doing with this and what I have an issue with red dot sights, not because I don't think that's a cool idea. It's not about that. It's about whether or not you can use this effectively in self-defense. So you can go to fixedpointsystems.com and you can pre-order my book on this very subject. And hopefully we can get Cowan on the show one time and we can hash this thing out. But I think at the end of the day, it's pretty clear that this study was made specifically to sell product. It's an advertorial, should not get any academic credit whatsoever. So this is the Double Tap Show. We will be back next Saturday, whether you like it or not. We'll see you next time.